With it being Dead by Daylight's milestone 10th anniversary, the Twisted Masquerade event was retired in favor of the creation of a new event, with that being the Black Banquet. But as soon as the Black Banquet event was released, it felt like a massive Category 5 hurricane impacted the player base. The anniversary event was very much a highly anticipated moment, but the actual energy this event unleashed was astonishing to say the least. This event was initially a bit overwhelming, truthfully speaking, with the main obstacle being the sudden overload of information that came crashing in alongside the typical festivities. It actually took me several matches to fully comprehend how the powers and abilities for the event functioned, as not only can each match feature different effects, but then within every match there's different effects before and after the second to last generator is completed. The secondary layers to each of the crazy powers and effects can pile up quite quickly, and depending on how well the special event abilities are utilized, the survivor experience can be either a nice summer breeze or a challenging uphill battle. And this is before even mentioning the frequency with which the event powers can be unleashed for either side to suffer through. And even after giving this event a few days to settle down, there's still so much to sort out when it comes to the Black Banquet. From the initial carnage that the various powers and special abilities that survivors have access to have caused, to the insanely frustrating stamina mechanic that killers can inflict through poisoning, and even to the overall mediocre blood point generation, this event has left everyone in shambles. And given how big the initial impact of this event has been, there's something unique about this event that I haven't personally seen that much discussion about. The thing I'm referring to is the Banquet event tile. Not very much has been officially noted about this tile, so I thought I'd roughly cover the basics of what this tile is, what it consists of, and how and where it typically spawns. I also haven't seen an official name for this tile anywhere, so while calling it the event tile is still fitting, I'm going to unofficially designate this tile as the Banquet tile for the remainder of this video to help give it a more proper name and classification. The Banquet tile is interesting for a few different reasons. First and foremost, this tile spawns in both the regular mode and the event mode. Yes, that's correct. The Banquet tile has a chance to spawn in the non-event mode. And depending on which mode you are playing in, the content inside of this tile is relatively the same every time it spawns, so you can have a pretty safe understanding of what to expect if it decides to spawn. I'm not exactly sure as to why this tile is capable of spawning in the regular mode, but I'm not upset about it. In fact, I actually kind of enjoy having the chance for something different to spawn. This helps liven up the overall experience on either side, as it throws a wrench into the usual plans a player may have when certain maps are selected. For instance, having the Banquet tile spawn can weaken or strengthen a map for survivors, albeit only by a small amount. All this depends on the tile it replaces though, as sometimes the Banquet tile can actually replace a tile that may not have been that particularly strong for survivors in the first place. It is important to note that I did some custom match testing to see if the Banquet tile could spawn in customs, but I was unsuccessful in getting it to spawn, so the only way to gather any data about this tile was through public matches. So what does the Banquet tile typically contain? The main features or highlights of this tile for the regular mode are pretty simple. It always has a generator, it always has a pallet, and it can sometimes spawn a hook. And for the anniversary event mode, it always has a banquet table, it always has a pallet, and it can also sometimes spawn a hook. In short, the Banquet tile is practically a guaranteed spawn point for a generator and a pallet, with the generator being swapped for a banquet table in the event mode. This is because the banquet tables spawn where generators normally do, so it makes sense why the Banquet tile always spawns one of these. So how and where does the Banquet tile spawn? From my research, the Banquet tile most commonly replaces another landmark tile on a given map, with the exact tile that it replaces varying from realm to realm. However, the Banquet tile is not a guaranteed spawn in either mode, so it only spawns when the RNG allows it to. Additionally, the Banquet tile will pretty much only spawn on original maps, and from my experience I would guesstimate that the Banquet tile has somewhere around a 33 to 50% chance of spawning on a respective map. For example, Autohaven typically spawns the Banquet tile in place of the Excavator or Car Crusher. Coldwing can spawn a Banquet tile in place of Cowtree or the Combine. Macmillan almost always spawns the event tile in place of the Water Tower or Log Pile. However, I did notice Shelter Woods spawned a Banquet tile one time, and because Shelter Woods does not contain a Log Pile or Water Tower spawn, the Banquet tile had to have replaced something else on the map. I unfortunately lost the footage for the Shelter Woods spawn, so I can't source it directly, but I thought I'd mention it since the spawn itself was a bit of an outlier. And one last example is Dead Dog Saloon, which can spawn the Banquet tile in the row of buildings alongside the street, which I thought was a bit of a unique spawn as well. And again, there's other original maps that can spawn the Banquet tile as well. These are just a few examples. Now to the most important question regarding the Banquet tile. How strong is it for looping? While I haven't had many opportunities to be chased near the Banquet tile, I believe the tile is overall very average at best. The pallet that spawns is not the best pallet ever, but it's also not the worst. The pallet can be easily mind-gamed on either side, and I think that's the healthiest kind of pallet loop to have. The main downside to the Banquet tile though is it's pretty horrid against ranged killers. so killers like Jason, Huntress, and the Deathslinger will love to see this tile spawn. This is where the overall strength of the map being weakened or strengthened comes into play, as the ranged killers would love to see the Banquet tile spawn over something like the Excavator on Autohaven. All in all, the Banquet tile is a welcome temporary change of pace to the RNG of some maps. It's really cool to see an event introduce a new element beyond just the special powers and abilities that are granted, and I believe the Banquet tile is truly one of the most positive things about this event. While it's not that fancy of a tile, the simplicity of the tile when compared to the rest of the event is kind of refreshing. If the Banquet tile ever returns in the future, perhaps adding a window vault or higher wall to the one section of the pallet loop would help improve the counterplay, but honestly the Banquet tile could be left how it is, and I wouldn't be that upset about it. And like I said earlier, the only way to gather information about the Banquet tile was through public matches, so if there's anything I missed or didn't cover, feel free to share in the comments. That's all I have for now. Thanks for watching.